guess this is why dieting is so hard.
Right, because, well, we never evolved to diet. We evolved to put that fat on. We did evolve, of course, to use it when we needed it, right? But we never evolved to get rid of fat. No, that was just there was never, in an absence of obesity, there wouldn't be selection for that kind of physiological system to lose fat without needing it.
Because when we try and diet, it does feel like our body's somewhat against us. When I hear about like sugar cravings, and many people have told me that the reason why diets don't work is because your body's trying to basically defend the weight that you're at, because that used to mean your survival.
That's right. We call that a starvation response, right? So when you go into negative energy balance, which is what a diet is, right? You're spending more energy than you're taking in. Your body goes into a starvation response. Your cortisol levels go up, for example, right? It's an emergency, right? Cortisol is our stress hormone. Stress doesn't cause cortisol to go up. Cortisol goes up when we are stressed, and it makes energy available to us. And one of the things that cortisol does is it makes us hungry, right? When you're really stressed at night, right, studying for an exam of one of my students, right, they get, hunger, they get sugar cravings, right, because their cortisol levels, because they're stressed, because I'm going to give an exam on the next day, goes up, and then they want energy, right? Cortisol also makes you store fat in visceral deposits, so belly fat, which is concerning, right? It's a useful kind of fat, right? Because the fat that we store in and around our abdomen is very hormone sensitive. It's got lots of blood vessels, so that fat is a great energy supply when you're physically active, right? When I went running around Central Park this morning, right, I was burning some of my belly fat. But when cortisol levels go up, that's like it also directs us to deposit fat in those stores, right? And the problem with those stores is that they're also very inflammatory. So when those fat cells get too large and they swell, they become dysfunctional, and they cause inflammation. They cause chronic systemic inflammation, which is just ruinous for our health. It causes diabetes and Alzheimer's and heart disease, all kinds of diseases that pretty much every major disease that we're worried about, mismatched diseases that we often talk about, are many of them are stress, are inflammation related, and that's why people are concerned about excess adiposity, excess fat, because excess fat causes inflammation.
So that means that people that are more stressed are more likely to have belly fat.
Correct. Yes, that's true. So that's one of the reasons why stress is, a risk factor for so many diseases. Psychosocial stress it has pernicious effects, and that's why racism, discrimination, all those factors that can elevate stress, commuting, have negative health consequences, because it us to put fat in the wrong places. It has a cortisol also turns your immune system down. Cortisol has all kinds of negative effects when it's long term and persistently high.
It's often been said that if you lose too much weight, for example, if a woman loses too much weight, then her menstrual cycle will stop. And I was thinking about this from an evolutionary perspective, and you were saying how, fat is essentially evidence of our survival. So in some ways, if that is true, then is that our body basically stopping our menstrual cycle to conserve energy? Basically, if you could think about it like our body saying to us, we don't have the energy to have kids right now.
You are absolutely right. So it's a little bit more complicated than that, but you basically got it right. So there's two things. First of all, fat is not just an energy store. Fat is also an organ, right? Fat produces hormones. Your fat produces a hormone called leptin, which affects appetite, but it also produces estrogen. So when women have very low levels of body fat, their estrogen levels decline, and they don't produce enough estrogen to have effective menstrual cycles. So they become what's called amenorrheic. Amenorrhea is just a fancy medical term for loss of sort of normal cycling. It's been shown by many researchers, a former professor of mine, Peter Ellison, and there are other researchers around the world, a woman named Grażyna Jasenska in Poland, others have shown that our bodies are incredibly sensitive to energy availability. For example, women who are dieting, they may have plenty of body fat, but when they're dieting, which means they're going to negative energy balance, levels of progesterone, which is a very important hormone for the menstrual cycle. Progesterone is produced in the second half of the menstrual cycle, and it maintains the uterine lining so that you can have implantation. Progesterone levels plummet. They go down by 50% during the luteal phase, that second half of the menstrual cycle, thereby decreasing their ability to conceive. Women who are very physically active, also, there's a decrease in the amount of progesterone, again, during the second half of the menstrual cycle. And a flip way of thinking about it, though, is that because remember, what we evolved to do is to have as many offspring as possible. And so our bodies also, another way of thinking about this also is that whenever there's extra energy available, the body, it's an adaptation to say, hey, let's use that energy for reproduction. So let's increase estrogen levels. Let's increase progesterone levels so we can increase our fecundity, increase our fertility. So there's a bit of a
balancing act.
Yes, it's a bit of a balancing act. So obviously, exercise is not bad for women who are trying to conceive, and women who are sedentary and aren't exercising have high levels of estrogen and progesterone, and that's maybe one of the reasons why physical activity decreases the risk of breast cancer so much. So women who are physically active have like a 30 to 50% lower rate of breast cancer, and part of that has to do with the fact that their hormone levels are more normal, because sedentary women have abnormally high levels. But nonetheless, it's the important point from what you asked is that the body is incredibly sensitive to energy, right? And so it knows that when energy levels are low, when you're losing fat, this is not a good time to invest, because think about it. Pregnancy lasts 9 months. It's incredibly expensive. Then you're going to be spending months later nursing, which is also very expensive. Maybe this is not a good time to invest. Let's wait until times are better. Then that this is a better use of a better time to get pregnant. You can have a much more likely positive outcome.